Welcome my dear listeners. Stay with me to get the news first and subscribe to the channel. Let's find out what's going to happen on royal family. According to a historian, Queen Elizabeth got in her car and put Meghan Markle in her place. After hearing from the head gardener, Hugo Vickers has talked about a supposed telling off moment and how the Queen thought you can't be rude to stuff. Behind closed doors, Queen Elizabeth didn't seem to be afraid to tell her family of it. She thought they needed it. Hugo Vickers, a royal historian who met the late Queen more than 40 times, says that after getting a report from the head gardener at Windsor, she got in her car and drove to talk to Duchess of Sussex. On the Daily Tea podcast, he was asked about the alleged incident and said she apparently was rude to one of the under gardeners, and the head gardener went up to the Queen and told her about it. The Queen got in her car and went down and tore a strip off her because you can't be rude to stuff. Hugo thought that Queen Elizabeth should have put Meghan Markle in her place because she had been rude to the gardener. The Duchess of Sussex has not yet made a public statement about what the historian said about this supposed telling off. But this isn't the first time that rumors have spread about Queen Elizabeth scolding Meghan for how she handles some parts of royal life. Royal author Robert Jobson wrote in the Windsor Legacy that the Duchess' choice to wear a Dior dress that cost an estimated £60,000 during a trip to Morocco made the Queen angry. When she read about it, she later let Meghan know that the outfit was an ill-judged choice because it cost so much. Queen Elizabeth has reportedly made it clear to Prince Harry, who had the final say over the Duchess' wedding tiara, his supposed "what Meghan wants Meghan gets" comment is now well known, but the monarch reportedly disagreed. Her Majesty did not approve. She reportedly said Meghan can't have everything she wants. Royal author Robert Lacey said she gets the tiara that I give her. Prince Harry said in his memoir that he never said anything like that, and Meghan ended up wearing Queen Mary's bandeau tiara for their wedding. These reports say that she may have had some words with Meghan from time to time, but the Duchess of Sussex has always spoken highly of her late grandmother-in-law. A few months after Queen Elizabeth died, she called her the most shining example of a woman in charge and said she was deeply grateful to have spent time with her. When she thought it was necessary, the Queen would also step in and scold other family members like Prince William. And in the Our Queen at 90 documentary, he talked about how he used to get in trouble when he was younger. We were chasing Zara, who was on a go-kart, and Peter and I were able to push her into a lamppost. The lamppost fell down and almost crushed her. I remember my grandmother being the first person to run across the lawn at Balmoral in her kilt. He said she charged over and gave them a almighty. During Trooping the Colour in 2016, Queen Elizabeth was also seen telling the Prince of Wales to stand up while they were on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. He had been leaning down to talk to George, but he stood up straight right away when he saw his amazing grandmother. Andrew said new life, the prison-like life at Marsh Farm. The news isn't treating Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's move to Marsh Farm like a happy new beginning. It is being reported as if it were a retreat into silence. According to the latest reports, a former royal has been kicked out of Royal Lodge, had his titles taken away by Buckingham Palace, and moved to a much quieter home on the Sandringham estate. The word prison esque doesn't mean exactly what it says, but it does a good job of describing the mood of the move. Fenced in, watched, far away from the old life he had in Windsor. Of course, Marsh Farm is not a cell block. It used to be a farmhouse with 5 bedrooms on Sandringham. Reports say that King Charles paid for major repairs before Andrew moved in. High-speed internet, satellite TV, luxury carpeting and more security were some of the improvements. The house is the house is comfortable, but the area around it is controlled. The place has a strange reputation for being bleak because of the difference between the improvements inside the isolation outside. The security package around the property gives you that controlled feeling because Marsh Farm is close to a public road. It now has CCTV, security lighting, a tall fence around the property, and a zone where planes can fly. That is what makes the name prison-like stick. Andrew might live in a private home, but the walls around it make it feel less like a country retreat and more like a carefully controlled area. The movie is especially shocking because it comes after a big fall from grace. In October 2025, Buckingham Palace said that King Charles had started the official process of taking away Andrew's titles, honors, and style. Andrew would then be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. The same statement said that he would give up his lease on Royal Lodge and move to a different private home. AP said the same thing and called it an unprecedented response to the public damage caused by his ties to Jeffrey Epstein. That is the real emotional background of Marsh Farm. Andrew has not only moved, he has also changed his status. He moved from Royal Lodge, which has long been thought of as one of the royal family's most famous private homes, to a much more secluded area on the King's private Sandringham estate. People and town and country both said that the move was real and that it happened after he was kicked out of Royal Lodge because the palace took away his titles and lease. Andrew had been living at Wood Farm for a short time before moving to Marsh Farm, which made the move feel even more strange. People said that his move to Marsh Farm was delayed and that Prince Edward and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, who had planned to use Wood Farm over Easter, were not happy about it. In Style also said that Edward and Sophie were upset about the delay and that Edward went to see Andrew to get him to finish the move. That's a very royal kind of pressure, not yelling in public, but being very impatient in private. There have also been softer but still telling reports about the family's worry. In Style say that Prince Edward and Sophie did a brotherly welfare check and that Princess Anne had also gotten in touch with Andrew. The reports say that those contacts were worried about his health during the chaos. That doesn't mean making up, and it doesn't mean going back to being liked by the royal family. It does mean that Andrew is not completely cut off from his family, even though things are not going well for him. When you look at the public record about his current situation, the sadness of his new life becomes even clearer. On February 19, 2026, Andrew was arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office, but he was released after 11 hours of questioning, according to Reuters. People and town and country both wrote about the same arrest and said that he denies the claim. He can't read the Marsh Farm move without that cloud hanging over it, because the isolation feels like a result of everything that has gone wrong around him. But the reports also say that the new life isn't completely without comfort. Town and country say that Andrew was recently seen walking near the estate with the last two corgis owned by Queen Elizabeth II. The picture is important because it's most human part of the whole story. A fallen royal walking dogs in a quiet place, far from the grand places that used to define him. It is sad picture to home life, and it says more about his new life than any dramatic headline could. Marsh Farm feels so bad because it reminds him of his old life. Andrew has moved from a big social house in Windsor to a private farmhouse on an estate where there isn't much movement. Visibility is low, and the public's gaze is still there but far away. The house may have new interiors and modern conveniences, but it still feels like it is closed off. It looks like a place made for a man who is no longer welcome in the center of royal life, but still needs to be kept close to the family. That's why so much of the news about Marsh Farm has focused on how people feel instead of just the facts. In Style talked about worries about Andrew's mental health, while the Times said that Edward's visit over Easter was a way for the family to support him during a hard time. Not only is the move about where you lived, it's about the mental reality of being pushed out of the public royal world and into a quieter, more limited life. The separation is even more clear in the larger royal calendar. According to Reuters, King Charles and Queen Camilla went to the Easter service at Windsor with Prince William, Princess Catherine, Princess Anne, Prince Edward and their kids. Andrew and his daughters did not go. Reuters said that Beatrice and Eugenie's absence was their own choice. But the main point is that the working royal family was there in public and Andrew was not. That is the clearest sign of where he stands now. He is outside the main picture even when the rest of the family is there. The private money that goes into Marsh farms adds to the story. People in town and country both said that King Charles paid for the renovations himself. This means that Andrew isn't just being sent to some random place and left to figure things out on his own. Instead, he is being housed on the family's private estate with a lot of help. Even with that help, the setting is a big step down from the public life he used to live. Yes, it is safe, but it is also a way to keep the royal family safe. The duality is what makes Marsh Farm feel like a prison. In writing, it is a renovated farmhouse on a private estate with nice amenities and security. In practice, it's a place where people can move around freely and are always reminded that Andrew's old job is no longer available. He might have rugs, a TV, and the internet. He might have dogs and family visits, but he doesn't have the same freedom, status, or visibility that he used to have to move around the center of the monarchy. The sad thing is that the move seems to have changed his life. Not just being a short break, people say that Marsh Farm is now his official home. And In Style says that it will probably be his permanent home. That sounds like a good idea, but it also sounds like the end. Royal Lodge was a way of life. Marsh Farm is the end. The farm isn't a prison, but the gates are up. The cameras are on, family visits are timed, and the old royal rhythm is clearly over. The sad new life at Marsh Farm is really about a man living with the effects of a collapse. He has the king's private support, the occasional worry of his siblings, and a home that is safe enough to keep him in and the world out. He also has to deal with a scandal, an ongoing investigation, and the fact that his family is moving on without him. That's why Marsh Farm doesn't feel like a new beginning. It feels more like a carefully planned exile. And this is where the story shifts from shocking rumor to something far more revealing about power, control, and quiet authority. Because whether this moment happened exactly as described or not, it perfectly captures how Queen Elizabeth II was known to operate, calm in public but very clear and firm behind closed doors. And honestly, that's what makes this so compelling, not the idea of a dramatic telling off, but the principle behind it, the belief that no one, no matter their title, is above basic respect. In my opinion, that's the real takeaway here. Not whether Meghan Markle was spoken to, but the reminder that the Queen's authority was built on quiet standards, not loud reactions. Because think about it. What kind of leader steps in personally over how staff are treated instead of ignoring it? And what does that say about the values she was trying to protect, even in the smallest moments? But here's where it gets even more interesting. What if stories like this say more about perception than reality? Because the royal family has always lived in that space between what's confirmed and what's believed. And that raises a bigger question. Are these stories shaping how we see Meghan, or revealing how the institution expects people to behave once they're inside it? Meanwhile, when you look at the bigger picture, from tiara decisions to people appearances, it feels less like personal conflict and more like a system quietly reinforcing its rules. Looking ahead, I think these kinds of stories will keep resurfacing, not because they're all true, but because they fit the image people have of a monarchy built on tradition and discipline. So now I'm really curious. Do you think moments like this show strong leadership or unnecessary control behind palace walls? And when you hear stories like this, do you trust them as insight into real events or see them as part of a much larger narrative being told over time? Because sometimes the most powerful royal stories aren't about what we can prove, but what people are willing to believe.